This week in Casual Watch Talk, Fortis Head for Mars, Bugatti's own Mido sells for $340,000, IWC go G-Force crazy, and we discuss Rolex security. Welcome to Casual Watch Talk. You're joined by Sam and Chris. How have you been, Chris?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Well, why don't we kick it off this week with some watch obsessions? Have you had a watch obsession this week?
A little bit. We got into a conversation over in our Facebook group. Definitely check it out. The Casual Watch Talk Facebook group. Got a bunch of folks over there, and super friendly. Lots of stuff to talk about, and we're open to all makes and models. So we don't no discrimination of watch types.
No Steinhardt.
So
no.
Yeah. No problem. Watch obsession this week I think would be TJ posted up a picture of his PVD chronograph that he had distressed. I'll use that term. Where it just didn't look the part, and so he took a little bit of sandpaper and just sort of softened the edges a little bit, exposed a little bit of the silver stainless steel underneath, and kind of gave it that feel. And then we got into a really great discussion about, how much is too much, and like how far is too far of this like faux distressing sort of thing. And then also like to match the look. I mean, I think a PVD pilot's watch, should look like you've had the thing in a jet, and you've done barrel rolls and it's gotten loose in your backpack when you were whatever. These sorts of stories that go with it, and I'm all for going for that look. Very similar to the Japanese have a term, wabi sabi, which is a appreciating an object that has these imperfections in it for its use and for what it is, and I think it can be well done. So it's a very interesting topic, and certainly my obsession this week was distressing pre-owned PVD watches.
Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? I know when CGI was very early developed, they were trying to strive for that perfection is in imperfection. Like, we can make things look beautiful, but we have to add in the imperfections to make them look realistic. Like, pores and spots on people's faces and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. You can get into that, especially like CGI. You can get into that like uncanny valley that exists where it's like, oh, it's too real, and then you're like, wait, none of this is real. And so, yeah, interesting design topic.
Yeah, or like some of that Star Wars stuff where it's like, oh, that looks really realistic, but what's wrong with the eyes?
That's right.
Well, I've had quite an interesting watch-related week. I've still not got my X33 back, so it's still
the saga continues.
The saga continues, but I did a thing. I did a thing this week where I've been looking at my watch collection, and we've been watching The Timepiece Gentleman, which I know I've plugged this before, but I've been really enjoying his longer form content. And he did one about what watches are investments. And of course, they deal in Rolex. And I was discussing with my wife, basically, that I enjoy watch collecting, but I've obviously been through a lot of watches, and I don't normally sell them for a profit. I don't know, is that the same with you, or...
Yeah, I feel like the best that I've ever done is sort of equal, which I take as a win, where it's like, well, I bought this particular piece for, let's say one of them I'm thinking of like $700-800, and, was able to wear it and experience it for a year, and then flipped it back on the market for $600-700 is not too bad, like $100 or something, or close, or even or equal. To experience the watch for a year.
Yeah, the one that I made money on was the Speedmaster. So I nearly doubled what I originally paid for it. Having said that, I held on for it for 10 years. Yeah. And then the good thing with that is that when unfortunately when the stock market dipped, I managed to drop the cash in for it there. So it did.
Perfect.
That's the one where I've won. But we were having this conversation about going forward, what do I want to collect that might retain its value? And of course, there is only one. So I started seriously flirting with the idea of, should I buy a Rolex for my 40th birthday? Okay. So we went into, and I'm seriously thinking about it. So I went into the local Rolex AD, and I went in with...
Did sirens go off as soon as you... Sorry.
Do you know what? It's the first time I've ever walked into a Rolex AD confident that I belonged. Not that I belonged there, but not feeling uncomfortable, because they're uncomfortable places, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah.
But I tell you what, this Rolex AD, it's in a huge mall in Florida here, the Mall of Millennia, if anybody knows it. Honestly, I bet you they had 200 slots for watches. I reckon they had 10 watches in there. I mean, all of the wall displays, the window displays, nothing. We walked up to the counter to speak to a really cool guy, actually, Justin, and the only one in that section, that case section that we looked at, was this lady's date, just probably a 26 mil with like rose gold and factory diamonds on it, something that just looked so out there. I spoke to him and I thought, well, let's just see what happens when you ask for a Rolex. So I asked for 2 models. I asked for the green OP, which now sells for double. That watch is $5,900 on Rolex, and you can't get one for less than 12. It's unbelievable. Okay. And we'll talk about a story in a minute about Rolexes as well. And I asked him, would he put me on the list for that? And he was like, yeah. And then I asked him to put me on the list for a 41 mil date just with that slate dial. By far, I think, is the...
Yeah.
And he said to me that the green OP, when they first released them, do you remember we talked about this where Rolex was sort of saying, oh, anybody can get this watch.
Right.
If you want it.
Yes, I remember that. Yes. Yeah. They're like, come on down. Come on down. And like every YouTuber was like, what?
So this Rolex AD that I went into is part of Mayer's group, which is owned by Watches of Switzerland. And he told me, Justin there told me that they could take orders for them. They originally, when they first came out, they could take orders for them. But after like 2 weeks, Rolex cut them off. And in that period of orders that they got for the green OP, they've only got through a quarter of that list. This guy, Justin, said that he'd only seen one green one come through their store.
In person, in the store.
Wow. He'd only seen. It's incredible, like the demand that they must have generated for this watch. So I'm going to see what happens, basically. If I'm interested to give feedback on the show, if by miraculous they do get a green OP or they do get a date just, then I might seriously consider buying one just to have it as an investment. But we'll see how it goes. So anyway, that was the big watch-related
big
news.
Obsession, yeah.
Big watch obsession. Cool. Well, that's the end of the watch obsessions. Shall we dive into this week in watches, because we've got a few news stories to go through, but it's definitely been a lighter week, I would say. First news story here is Bugatti, famous car maker, sold his own, or he's obviously passed away now, but his own Mido watch has just recently gone up for auction, and it blew away all of the expectations. They were originally slating for it to be like $80,000 around there, but it ended up selling for $340,000. I'll show you this is a story from Watch Pro. Don't know that I'm loving the design myself, but it's definitely the whole Bugatti front grille, isn't it? And apparently he was a huge fan of Mido and regularly bought them as gifts for employees and also for...
Yeah, it's certainly a unique, a unique looking piece. Now, the question I had is it actually a unique piece from the manufacturer? Like, is this only one of one, or did they make a bunch of these in this sort of style with the front of the radiator grille of a Bugatti?
Yeah, so this was a commissioned piece by him.
Oh, okay. I mean, then seems one of one. It seems like a pretty decent price for that, and certainly a piece of Bugatti history.
Absolutely.
If you're a collector or you've got a couple of their cars, I cannot afford a strut off one of their cars, but but certainly a bit of automotive history and Bugatti itself. From a car perspective, it feels like they were in the game and then they went away and they really didn't make anything. And it wasn't until the Veyron and they got acquired by the Volkswagen Group that like sort of the name came back and some of the prestige. So yeah, pretty good price for a one-off prestige watch like that.
Yeah, I thought that was quite interesting because we're so used to seeing auctions where it's rare Rolexes or rare Omegas. So I thought it was interesting that Mido kind of came up as a rare watch that obviously blew the expectation. I'm sure it's to do with the association, of course, but let's move on to our next story. And this one in particular hit home for me because where I'm from in Manchester is actually not that far from Wigan. This happened last year, but unfortunately this guy was murdered for his Rolex Submariner. Paul, the reason that I bring this up is, it raises two unfortunate questions. Is Paul Thorpe made a great video on this I don't know if you watched Paul Thorpe for a long period of time. He's got a real bee in his bonnet, and rightly so, about the Rolex lost and found register, and that they stopped doing it. So there's this idea that Rolexes at one time, if they were stolen, you could register it with Rolex. In fact, I've heard of people doing this where they found a Rolex or something, or they might have found it and they've taken it to the police, and the police have gone on to this. But apparently Rolex have stopped this, and Paul Thorpe's fear is that these stolen Rolexes are now untraceable. I mean, thankfully for this poor guy that lost his life here, Steve McMyler, they captured his killers, or at least the alleged killers. But so it is interesting because Paul Thorpe thinks now that if there was a lost and found register, then when people try to process these watches or try and sell them on, that there will be some, and we talked about this with blockchain, didn't we?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I mean, I feel, such a tragedy, first of all, such a tragedy. And, it's not worth your life. So, I mean, if somebody wants it, they can have it. It's just not even worth it, but the fact that it gets singled out and then now it becomes this piece that you can't, you don't feel safe. And I haven't heard it so much here, maybe in the cities, but certainly from some of the YouTubers in Europe, I definitely hear I'm leaving the Hulk at home. I'm not going out with that. I'm putting that in the safe, and I'll go to the wedding with it, but I'm not going to go, on mass transit, or get an Uber and go, down to the shops with it. So, sad that it's gotten to the point where, you have these thieves, these criminals that are out looking for these particular pieces. So you sort of identified that. But from what I've seen, Paul Thorpe, I believe that he's correct, that you could just solve this problem. This is a problem that we create, that they're maybe not responsible, but certainly some of the responsibility of the way these watches are turned over and sold on and untraceable and this sort of thing. I mean, they could press a button and make it so that these are not untraceable. They can make it so that these are not, one-off. I mean, for the millionth time, I will compare it to cars. It used to be that you didn't have any, you had rudimentary lock systems on cars and you had weird alarms. But nowadays, the doors in your car have your VIN number on them, and it's stamped in 15 different places. And so these companies will still, try to sell stolen parts but eventually they will find them, and eventually they will stop them, because it's they track every little piece, and they track these these down to the nuts and bolts of every every machine. And so there's no reason why we can't just press a button. We have the technology, and do this with our expensive Swiss watches.
Yeah, and as well, the cost that some of these pre-owned Rolexes are going for as well. I mean, I remember last year, maybe it was the year before, I reviewed the Daytona at Bob's Watches, and I'm sure they were selling it for $25,000, and I thought that was steep at the time. And those ceramics now, they're $34,000. I mean, right. The prices have gone crazy. But yeah, I mean, on one hand, I know what you mean about wearing really expensive watches. Wigan, if Wigan's anything, I've been to Wigan, quite a few times. If it's anything like Stockport, there's just those people that will try and steal anything off you, unfortunately, right. And they're cowardly because they'll fight you in a pack instead of take you on one-on-one, right. which unfortunate. Right. Fortunate thing in the UK. Horrible. But yeah, so really, really sad. I think it highlights a lot of certainly what the stuff that Paul Thorpe's been saying about the Rolex lost and found. Also, I know a concern that we all have, I guess, about wearing very expensive watches out there.
And I think you mentioned it in the beginning. I think the majority of folks are honest. And they've done this social experiment many times where they leave a wallet with some cash in it, and 80 to 90% of the time people look at the address and they can contact the people and send it back, and it's just this small percentage, and we could just squash it. So
moving on to our next story now, and Fortis released a new watch that is firmly heading for Mars. And it's actually involved in some of the early testing that they're doing. I'll just show you this, Chris. Have you seen this this new watch? I know it was quite the buzz on our Facebook group. But this is being specifically designed for a test that's being done in conjunction with the Israeli Space Agency, where they're going to send some people into they're calling them analog astronauts. I'd never heard this term before. Have you heard this?
Yeah, I have. It's a little strange, but yes.
So these are essentially astronauts that are going to simulate living on Mars in the desert. So this watch has been designed for them, but with the idea that it will eventually go to Mars. So Fortis, obviously famous for being part of the Russian space program, the Roscosmos space program. But what do you think of this, Chris? This watch?
I like it. I mean, it's got. I mean, Fortis is definitely in my wheelhouse as far as like tool watch style. They've done some Martian mission stuff in the past as well. So it's good to see, even with the new owner, that they're sort of sticking to that. And maybe I'll say this, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I thought like, well, what's the chance that, are we just playing Martian on the Earth? And is this, what's the real possibility here? But as we're getting down, as we're moving through the years here, an actual Mars mission is looking like it could be on the horizon. And why not stock them? Why not design them with the folks that are going to be, if not going on, but designing those first missions? And so when they go to outfit the first Martians, or the first folks that'll be on Mars, they're going to reach for this watch or something newly designed from them. And that's really a long-term opportunity that Fortis is going to take advantage of. And I'll tell you, if this is the first watch on Mars, they'll be riding that marketing for many, many, many years.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely got some interesting design choices, hasn't it? It's got the double pips at the top here. You've got the very large central chrono there that looks to count up to 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. But I like the look of it. It's all titanium.
It's a little controversial with the 0 in front, but it it actually balances the dial. 0 2 versus 10, that sort of thing. Yeah, interesting design choices there, but it'll definitely. But I think it looks like a pretty good tool watch ready to go to Mars.
So next story is definitely a little bit of a secret, but it's also a teaser. This week, I had the opportunity to speak to Mike France at Christopher Ward. He came on the audio version of the show. I feel like it was a year ago, but they are coming out with some new watches, and I can't, unfortunately, I'm under embargo until Thursday, or Chris or I are under embargo till Thursday. I'll be releasing a video the day it launches, but keep an eye out for it because I think these are game-changing for them. There's 3 watches that are coming out, and I think they are some of the best that I've ever seen from Christopher Ward. Like, I know this sounds like I'm hyperbole here, but if you hold out for that, unfortunately, we haven't got access to the watches, nor did Mike, who, I mean, he's the CEO of Christopher Ward, and he hasn't got the watches there. But there's going to be plenty of stock images in there, plenty of the blueprints and things like that. I think you'll really find it interesting. So a little plug for this upcoming interview special that we'll be releasing on Thursday. Next story is, I've only just found this one before we were ready to make the show, but I was just watching Teddy Balbazar did a great upload on a watch brand I'd never heard of, RGM Watches. Have you heard of them, Chris?
I have. They're what are they in Pennsylvania? Is that right?
Yeah, they're in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So where Hamilton started.
Yeah. Other than American Watchmaker, that's not too much. I know if I remember correctly, they do smaller run pieces, special pieces, but I don't, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that they're known for.
I'll leave a link in the description down below because, as normal, Teddy does like a great job of these watch factory tours. The reason I mention it now is I'm amazed that we don't know more about them, or that we're not talking about them more, because they make their own movements.
Wow.
They make 90% of the movement themselves. They don't buy any off-the-shelf parts. It's not an ETA movement that they're modifying. As we've talked about before, the things that they can't get in the US they can't make themselves, are the hairsprings and also the jewels. I didn't realize that you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, I suppose.
Synthetic rubies,
And it's amazing. Like, he's got machines in there to do the guilloche on the dial that I think are over 100 years old. I highly recommend you check it out. I didn't know much about them, but they are hand-making movements in the US.
Wow.
I think everybody should be talking about them.
Yes, I totally agree. That's great.
Let's move on to our next story here, and this one, I had to run it past TJ, the channel's resident aviation expert, because I couldn't quite believe what I was reading with this. I'll show you this on IWC's website here, but this must have slipped under the radar, Chris. Did you see this watch that they released?
No, I haven't. This is new to me.
So this is their new big pilot watch, and it's a bit of a concept piece. And if it didn't have IWC on the dial, I think you would swear that this image was something from like a G-Shock, how they used to expand this out.
Right.
But this watch will withstand 30,000 G, which TJ has had me on good authority. That is 29,991 more G than what the human body can take.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So they've created this watch that is apparently the most shock-proof watch, a mechanical watch that's ever been made, so it can withstand these amazing shocks. They got the Cambridge University to test this resistance and everything like that. But this one, I don't think it was a Watch and Wonders release.
Yeah, it's new to me.
Yeah, so they've got this new spring G protection. They got this ceramic titanium case.
It looks like it suspends the whole movement. Now, what's interesting is the movement itself still has the shock on the jewel for
like the Inca block type of thing.
yeah. So it's interesting. Like, so they're shock protecting the whole movement in this case. And little caveat, and I see in your notes here. So TJ, that's 9G is passing out. So I think people can take a little more. I think what was it? The F1 crash was like 50 something, which you don't want to take 50 Gs ever. And like if you drop something like a laptop or something, like it could take like a a quick like 40 G jolt. But again, this is nothing compared to that 30,000 number.
Yeah, I'm not quite I mean, it's cool, but it's took them 8 years to develop this.
Yeah.
But I'm struggling for, I mean, TJ said this, that it's a solution looking for a problem.
Right. Yeah, I feel like this is the oil-filled watches that can go 10,000 meters. That's what this is. So like you're like, well, I got to 30 and I died. so I guess we can go the whole way. Your watch just floating down in an inner space there. But yeah, a little bit of looking for a problem that we don't necessarily have. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe this is just, maybe this is just a technology, advancement for them, or a technology demonstrator, if you will, for them, where they're like, oh, well, if we mount the movement this particular way on these sort of sliders, we can shock protect it much more. So, who knows? Maybe it'll, because if it, I worry about dropping watches. It's like even off, like I've got hard tile in the house, and just I'm a tall guy, and so like if it falls from 6 feet, it's a ways. So it could do something there.
Well, I smashed I smashed the Speedmaster.
Oh, jeez.
On the, and that's how good that Hesselite is, really, because all it did was crack the Hesselite. It didn't shatter it or anything like that. And the watch, it didn't damage the watch at all.
Wow.
It was when the kind of clasp failed on it.
Right.
And I dropped it onto a tile surface from a height.
Yeah,
that was a nerve-wracking
yeah,
day.
But it seems like the crystal took the hit there, which is good.
I will give that definite props to the Speedmaster, that when I had it for those 12 years or whatever, I did not baby that thing at all.
Right.
I didn't really understand luxury watches, so I didn't understand anything about mechanical movements or magnetism at the time. And I bashed it around a lot, but it took it. I mean, it's no joke that it went through all of those NASA tests with flying colours, reportedly.
That's cool.
In fact, when I was chatting to Mike at Christopher Ward, he was saying, and I'm not sure, I tried to search for this stat myself. He said that he heard that Omega, only 10% of the watches they sell are chronograph models.
Oh.
Everything else is like a 3-hander or one of the other variants.
Okay.
So I found that very interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Only 10% of all of the stuff that they sell?
Yeah, you should watch that upcoming interview that I do with him, because he's got little tidbits of information in there. Some fascinating stuff about the watch industry that he can just reel off, because they're Christopher Ward, they're constantly inquisitive about watches themselves, hence the super compressor and the sapphire dial watch. So he's like a constantly, he's a watch lover as well, that's constantly trying to search these things out. So I found that really interesting.
Maybe that's why it took them. I mean, I think they only recently started down with the chronographs for them. I mean, that wasn't all, they started in the GMT 3-handers first, then the GMTs. And like
Christopher Ward.
Christopher Ward, yeah.
Well.
And so like maybe that's why, because they're just like, well, if we're not going to be if we're going to be going into all of the effort to make one, let's spend the effort, but also to know that like it's not going to make up 60% of our catalog.
Yeah, he was full of little gems on. One of the other ones that he dropped was about that there's only 2 crown manufacturers of any repute in the world. So like the majority of crowns come from these, or certainly the luxury crowns come from. But right. I won't tease anymore. I've said too much already. Wait it out for Thursday.
Yeah, can't wait.
Well, guys, we went over some really interesting stories this week. I'll leave all of the links in the description down below. Head on over to the Casual Watch Talk Facebook group to continue the conversation there. As always, we appreciate you watching and listening, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks, guys. Bye.